Dum Diddy Dum Diddy Do is the third episode of the fifth season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Ted Wass, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a pretty decent episode. I think we get some pretty interesting moments with Charlie. We don't really have a strong subplot. The subplot is basically Jake is on the phone the entire episode. I don't really have any thoughts on that other than it was fine. Some of the conversation was a little grown up, but then I kind of forget that Jake is actually getting quite a bit older now. I don't have any other thoughts beyond that. The rest of the narrative focuses on Charlie, and this starts off because Alan is busy. Charlie doesn't have a date. He doesn't have anybody to go to the movie theatre with, and he happens to mention that he's not really fulfilled with a lot of his dates recently. So Alan suggests that Charlie goes out with somebody closer to his own age. He might have a better time if the date is a bit more age appropriate. And Charlie doesn't think that this is a good idea. Apparently he'd much rather have a conversation with the seagulls. And Alan then comes in the following morning, having had a great night, and he suggests actually a blind date for Charlie. Alan's date has a friend who might be a good match for Charlie. Well, I don't necessarily think she's a good match, but she's looking to date nevertheless. And Charlie's still not interested in dating somebody his own age, largely because apparently their earlobes are bigger. And we cut to Charlie waking up in bed with a younger woman, and he realises that this is just not a fulfilling experience anymore, and he tells Alan in the middle of the night that he'll agree to the blind date. And Alan's reaction as he kind of sat up, bolted upright in bed in his very sleepy state, I thought was very entertaining. And then we have Charlie being quite nervous about the date. And he's nervous, and Alan suggests that he changes his shirt to get out of the bowling shirt and to wear longer trousers for a change as well. And he looks very smart. They both look very smart. They go to the restaurant, and we meet Donna, played by Kimberly Quinn, who is Alan's date, and Linda, played by Ming-Na, who is Charlie's date. And she's a judge and definitely a professional. And that's not to say that Charlie can't date professionals, but certainly it's a profession his dates wouldn't usually have. And Charlie makes a lot of bad jokes. He's clearly very nervous. He clearly doesn't know how to talk to a woman like Linda. And by the end of the date, we cut very quickly. We meet, we have our introductions, we have a couple of corny jokes from Charlie, and then we're in the car with Charlie and Alan afterwards. And Charlie seemed to have a decent time, but we find out pretty quickly when Donna phones Alan that Linda's not interested. Linda didn't like Charlie, and Charlie's not willing to let that go. And we cut to the next scene, and Charlie is phoning Linda for what we learn is the third time, leaving messages on her phone. And Berta's there to have an interesting discussion with Charlie. It's brief, but she had some questions about why Charlie was behaving this way, which I thought was a nice way to kind of make us as viewers think about these things as well. Why is Charlie behaving this way? And I think it's fair to say, in my opinion, but I think it's definitely a fair conclusion to make, but let me know if you think differently, but I think he's phoning Linda back repeatedly, or phoning her at all repeatedly, because she's rejected him, and he's not used to being rejected. He's used to young women falling all over him. And there was one point, I didn't write this quote down, so I'm not saying it word for word, but he basically said he wasn't sure how to talk to women like Linda because it's much harder to blow smoke up their asses when they're older, more experienced, career professionals. They're not just going to lap up everything that he says, and it meant that he was struggling to talk with her, and he's not used to that rejection. And what he does, I have to say, was not acceptable, but it looked so powerful, because he decided, well, it seemed initially like he was just going to give up, get drunk, and sleep with a younger woman. But the next thing we see is Charlie being dragged into the courtroom to face the judge because he's very, very drunk. And I have to say, visually, just such a powerful image. You could smell the image as well. You could smell the alcohol. And he just looked horrendous. Probably the worst Charlie has ever looked. Which is quite an interesting point, actually. Because when we do see Charlie drunk quite a lot, but he never he never looks that bad. We don't get to see the physical effects of alcohol that often. And I guess that's largely because that would be really uncomfortable to watch all of the time. But here we do see that, and it's quite a sight. And she agrees to go out on one date with him, and then we end the episode with Charlie being picked up by Alan and Jake. And it's not the strongest ending, but it's fine. And I actually don't think I liked how the last few scenes played out, if I'm being honest. I don't love the direction in which it went, but I still enjoyed the episode as a whole. I don't know if I have any personal highlights from this one. I don't think there are any specific moments that I kind of enjoyed. I think there were a few shocking moments, or mildly shocking. Certainly the image of Charlie drunk, dragged into the court. He just looked horrendous. It was very well done. Oh, and I didn't mention this, but when we were in the restaurant, the waitress was somebody Charlie had slept with and never called back. That moment I thought was quite well done. But I don't think there are any other moments that are particularly powerful. But that being said, aside from not loving the ending, I still thought this was a pretty good episode. Dum Diddy Dum Diddy Do was still ultimately a rather enjoyable episode of 2.5 Men, and definitely an interesting look at Charlie.